Earlier this morning, we had a panel discussion on cybersecurity strategies, and Martyn Booth from dunnhumby was due to be part of that, but had other pressing work to carry out. But I'm very happy to say it means we can continue this conversation and develop it. And Martyn, thanks for joining us. I know you've been crazy busy today. But just to set the scene, dunnhumby, as you've just explained to me, is now owned by Tesco. dunnhumby launched the Tesco Club Card, and you undertake similar services for a whole range of other companies?
Yeah, so dunnhumby is owned by Tesco Group. In the 90s, we created Club Card. So if you've all got Club Cards, we're the guys that do the data analysis and do media targeting, substitute products, supply chain analytics, all that kind of stuff. And we do that for everyone else around the world, not UK retailers, other retailers, but everyone else. So we've got nearly 1 billion customer profiles.
So you do data, really?
Yeah, quite a lot.
We were talking just earlier about the importance of data management, so that I'm sure resonated. But look, we're here to talk cybersecurity strategies, and you're CISO at dunnhumby. So how has the landscape of cyber threats changed in the recent past, and how do people like you need to respond to those?
Well, I think there's a couple of things really that we've seen in the marketplace. Talking specifically about threats, we've seen more AI-powered threats coming through. So the sophistication, the ability to launch attacks more quickly and more rapidly, and to do it more regularly is all powered by sort of new AI-powered malware, which puts even more pressure on sort of already overstretched security teams. So I guess the balance that a lot of CISOs are trying to strike at the moment is how much do you rely on AI as a countermeasure to that?
Yeah.
And how much and what else can you do really to mitigate against those risks? Because you can if you're an attacker, you can afford to innovate at a fairly quick speed, and if it doesn't work, then you move on. We don't have that luxury on the defensive side, so for us, it's harder to rely fully on AI, which is in many cases, an unproven technology. Yet, if you don't leverage it, you're going to be more exposed, typically with a bigger problem at the same level of resourcing that you've got. So
there is the risk, isn't there, of a sort of escalating AI arms race.
Yep.
But you're suggesting that actually are you suggesting that other types of fundamental security procedures will fight AI, such as managing your staff, cyber awareness, etc.? What is the answer?
I mean, I wouldn't profess to know the exact answer, but what we're looking at in order to mitigate this, I would say, firstly, to echo the words of the AWS CISO, zero trust is the one most important thing you can do to protect your environment. So if you can implement zero trust methodologies throughout your environment, you're going to be in good shape to protect it, and that's both against AI-powered risks, which are largely to get a foot in the door rather than to actually exploit a full attack. So if you can still manage the part at which they have entered the environment, whether it's a breached email account or a breached server, if you can still limit their ability to move around the environment or to execute additional permissions elsewhere, you're still in pretty good shape. So I think there's some technical controls that need to be put in place. We're quite far along on our zero trust journey, and we've seen it's difficult to roll out because although it probably has the biggest bang in terms of defensive capabilities, it also has the biggest risk in terms of disrupting the business if you get it wrong. Yep. So rolling that out is hard, but if you get it right, it's a very effective strategy. And I think you overlay that with additional awareness and things like that. And we've been rolling out all sorts of tooling. So a good example of an AI tool that is very capable, we use abnormal security for inbound email security. So it screens for phishing emails and spam and everything like that. It's a very effective tool for that. And that allows us to focus a little bit, because I think 2 or 3 years ago, most of our awareness training would have been around phishing mitigation.
Yes.
Because ransomware was the result of phishing, obviously, and often, and that was a huge risk for most businesses. I think as EDR has been more effective and you've developed zero trust to stop the lateral spread of ransomware, it allows us, and then we've got tools that are filtering emails more effectively, it allows us to focus on other areas that we should be training people on around.
What are they? Yeah.
Well, it depends actually. We do a lot of risk prioritization by role to work out what specific roles might be exposed to, and then we train them on those things. So, for instance, in finance, it might be how to handle your unstructured data properly. So, what do you do with spreadsheets? Where can you send them? How do you store them? Then when do you get rid of them? All the way through to some things around home. How to protect your family and things like that. So we've rolled out password managers and given licenses to their families so that they can take some of those cultural changes back home with them, which then reinforces them at work. So stuff like that. So it's kind of it's all about layering security, but I think it's less against one very specific training piece and more about what do you need specifically to know, and then to put technical controls around the things you need to know.
I can see a big group like the Tesco Group doing exactly that, supporting all of its staff in their home life, because clearly it has an effect on business life too, but it's a bit about corporate responsibility in here as well. And yet, our keynote a couple of sessions ago, Anik from CyberSafe put up a slide which said, in their survey, 52% of employees questioned said they hadn't been trained in AI, which is astounding. How do these two different approaches square? I'm not sure they do.
Well, I guess it depends. I think training is lagging behind AI capabilities firstly. So I think there's a lag, I think, in terms of getting AI into the masses. If I'm honest, it's not a problem for us. We're a data analytics company. We use AI daily. We've got 500 data scientists in our business. So AI is part of how we operated. We've been using AI for 10 years.
Yep.
So it's not as much of a problem for us, but equally, governance of generative AI, which we now have to encourage our employees to use because there's so many efficiency gains from it. Governance from a security perspective, that is really hard to do well. And then you're in that difficult position of saying, well, we really shouldn't do this, which then the business says, well, we're 20% less efficient, versus, well, I can't really control it. So it's either on or off type scenario. And we're looking at the moment at controls where we can get in the middle of that and have people use it, but be more, but us have more governance over it. But it's really hard to do that well, and I think a lot of businesses are struggling with that around ChatGPT, Gemini, those kind of services.
Sure. Can I sort of phrase this question in the most inappropriate way? Were you ever foolishly to leave the wonderful position you're in, working for the wonderful company you do, and start in another place? What's the first thing, as CISO, what's the first thing you would do to assess and improve where you need to, your cybersecurity strategy and implementation? Where do you start? What's the first thing in your mind?
It depends on the business, firstly, and it depends what you've got available. Some businesses have partial, fully formed strategies. Some have gap analysis. When I joined my current firm 3 years ago, it was mid gap analysis being conducted by one of the big four, and I think having that complete report 3 weeks after I joined is very, very powerful. Where are your control deficiencies? And you can create that yourself, but it takes. CISOs often talk about their first 100 days, which is the first 100 days they spend in a business. That's typically for them to understand the business assets they need to be worried about, where the revenue is being generated from, the stuff that if it goes wrong is, job loss for you.
Yeah.
And then and also to work out what your control maturity looks like and where it's spread. So having a head start on that really helps you get going. But otherwise, I would do exactly that. You do it yourself. You go around the business and you look, depending on what team size you have.
Of course, and which raises the question of legacy systems, and do you bolt on or reinvent? Because therein lies one of the biggest risks. Nick from Google Cloud earlier was postulating that trying to retrofit effective security to legacy systems is bound to end in tears.
I wouldn't want to talk about some of the reasons Nick might have said that. We're one of the bigger GCP customers in the UK, and they're heavily trying to flog.
Aren't we all?
But equally, it's a fair point. I suppose I've never found security as a great reason only to refactor applications, though. It's something that I suppose the businesses, they expect you to be able to retrofit controls around it and stuff. Okay. And as security is the sole driver, somewhat hard. What I have found more effective is when we're closing our data centers next year, we'll be fully cloud. In order to do that effectively, you have to refactor a lot of your applications because they have to be cloud native to be cost effective. That's a better driver. So some of our old legacy applications are rewritten as cloud native tooling, and that allows me to insert security processes more effectively. So being on that process, and that goes back to what are your key revenue generating streams, because if we can agree that those should be retrofitted, then a lot of your risk is managed that way, and then we can retrofit controls that maybe are slightly less effective but good enough around your less sensitive assets. And Google's a great platform, by the way, so I wouldn't give them too much.
No, of course. Bit of banter is fine. If there's any questions in the room, by the way, try and catch my eye and put your hand up, and we'll get a microphone to you. And same if you're watching online from in the office or at home, send your questions through the chat bar on the right hand side of your screen, and they'll come to my iPad and I'll ask them. And in that spirit, people who've been in this room before know that my very good friend ChatGPT has been helping my research. So can I just ask a couple of questions which Chat, the other excellent OpenAI sources are available, I should say, has asked. The first question was, most breaches exploit human error. So if technology can only go so far, what are you doing to build a security first culture at scale? Good question, rubbish question, and can you answer it?
I think it's a good question.
Oh, okay.
And I think we had maybe 7 or 8 years ago, identity was quite a big thing in security, and then I think everyone decided collectively it was too hard to solve, so it kind of got nudged away, and it's now come back into focus when we've got better tooling, some of which is AI. You know, essentially identity stores are just data sets, and you can analyze data sets with AI. So tooling now is becoming available to help you solve that problem. So identity is coming back up front and foremost again, and part of that identity is around how you train people and how you give them access to the things that they need. So I think that the answer is that it's split. Understanding human risk is an easy concept. It's quite hard to do in practice. And there's lots of sort of new tooling coming through now, which is attempting to do that. Because if you look at all of the telemetry that you have from a security stack, what people are accessing, if they may have clicked on a website they shouldn't have done, and it's being flagged as a potentially malicious website because they may have typed in something incorrectly, or they clicked on a link. All of that telemetry, joining that together, should give you an idea of where your risk pockets sit within your organization, so you can target your learning towards those individuals. And we're only getting to the point now where we can really understand all of that telemetry and really target that, rather than just saying, here's your hourly training once a year, and we'll just do password management, and we'll do don't click on links, this is how you identify a phishing email. So I think with that better understanding comes the ability to train, which then will start to encourage culture. But that's kind of a bottom-up approach, where you're looking at training people with the stuff they need to know, and really making sure they understand it, and engaging with them regularly. And we have security champions throughout the business to help facilitate that process, which is kind of a fairly new initiative for ours. And then you've got the top-down approach, and there's no way around it. Without your executive team taking it seriously, there's no way that everyone else will do, and it does filter down through that. And I've worked with businesses where that hasn't been the case, and it's really hard to be a security team. You're kind of floating uphill, or trying to swim upstream like a salmon. And then you've got other businesses that take it very, very seriously. So I think that makes it easier. And obviously that doesn't help anyone that's a security leader, the second part, because that's just the culture of the organization overall. But you can manipulate the bottom part, and I think that more collaboration with the business, more kind of championship roles where they can really they've got somebody they can go to and ask questions of, is really helpful.
I can't believe that, particularly in the past few weeks when we've had your excellent colleagues at M&S and Co-op struggle with the cyber attack, that this isn't the very focus of every day.
We say that, and I don't know anything about.
No.
Well, I can't speak about anything about the M&S breach, but the truth is that some of the attack methods that were used by the alleged attacker, many of them are quite easy to mitigate against with fairly basic tooling. So,
such as
the malware that's deployed initially to get access to some of the systems, any EDR capability would have stopped that, and therefore presumably whatever system that was on didn't have EDR capability. So I think there's a hygiene factor there as part of that breach.
Yep.
That was an issue. And I say don't know anything about the M&S security team, so I'm not saying that they were remiss.
No.
But the simple fact of the matter is there's some things you can do there. There was some MFA resets done via SMS compromise. We stopped doing that last year. So and we also know that they tend to use MFA fatigue for those attacks, which is when you generate lots of MFA prompts on the hope that somebody's going to tick the box. Last year we moved to a 2-digit MFA prompt capability. So when the prompt's generated on your screen, you have to type in the two-digit code on your phone to make sure you're marrying up prompt with what you're actually trying to achieve. So it's a very easy way to prevent MFA fatigue. We got a lot of pushback from that last year, and now everyone understands why. Because it's an extra step typing in 2 digits rather than pressing a button.
Yeah.
Users don't like friction. I get that, but now everyone understands why that was something that we decided to do. So I think there's lots of hygiene stuff that you can do. And I say that as a retailer because the last 3 weeks have not been fun for us. We're a data business, but we're owned by a retailer. So everyone's very worried about M&S, Co-op and Harrods.
Completely. And actually what you say about MFA fatigue is exactly a point that was made by Anik from CyberSafe earlier, that is an increasing problem. And actually picking up on...
It's MFA resets as well. So you go through that process because obviously you're reliant on your service desk to, if somebody says, I've lost my MFA token, okay, well, we can reset it. That goes back to human, right? And if you can get around a service desk, it's very easy to get MFA reset, and then that control is worthless.
Yeah.
So now, and this is something we've changed recently, we won't do that without a government ID being on a video that somebody can see and then validating with their line manager. So it's created some positive changes.
And again, going back to something you said earlier, or that we discussed earlier, the whole business first approach. You were talking about training people, and I guess if a company as yours has provides training and understanding and support for all of your people about how to keep themselves safe online, that is replicated through the business working day.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that we want to make it part of their kind of psyche rather than something they do when they get to work or don't do, perhaps. And I think it's, in order to secure a human, it's not just between 9 and 5. It's they should think about the things we want them to think about all the time.
Okay, thank you. Next question from my dear AI friend. With the growing complexity of supply chains and business ecosystems, how can organizations strike the right balance between agility and third-party risk management without slowing down innovation? Good question, rubbish question?
It depends exactly what you mean by it. Are you specifically interested in third-party supply chain security or more about the overall innovation of a company?
Supply chain security.
I mean, from my perspective, supply chain assurance has always been a little bit of a fallacy. And please, in the room, please tell me if you think differently. But it's always been hard for me to say, even though we have fairly robust, well, at least in terms of what everyone else has, fairly robust third-party assurance processes. I'd say the level of assurance that we actually get is actually relatively low, right? You can't. There's been lots of ways of looking at it. We've got companies like BitSight and Security Scorecard, which have very capable use cases in some cases, but ultimately they're scanning one website normally to give you an idea of what the third party is doing, and I just feel like it's a bit narrow. And I kind of feel like assurance-wise for third parties, we're never going to get there unless we're able to in some way connect to those third parties and get some sort of policy profile of their environments. Say you were using a third party to process credit card numbers for you, and they claimed to have a whole load of cloud security controls in the environment that they operated. The only way to really get assurance would be to access that cloud environment and check that their policies were engaged the way that they told us they would do. Otherwise, how well do you know the policy's been embedded? So it's hard. Equally, lots of times the business wants to move quite quickly, and third-party risk management traditionally is not a quick sport. So it's really hard to get that balance right. So we operate on, well, I mean, we're lucky, I suppose, in many ways, because we can leverage Tesco. We've got 3,500 people. There's about just under 65 people in my security function. With that number, that scale, it's hard for us to really bully suppliers, whereas Tesco obviously can nudge them a bit harder if we want to ask additional questions. Yep. So we have that benefit occasionally, but I think for smaller companies, it's really hard, especially if you've got a big strategic vendor. And for instance, Oracle had a cloud breach recently that could have been fairly significant. We've had quite a lot of difficulty getting information about that out of them, as you know, not one of their biggest customers. So it's really hard to get that right. The view I have about that is you have to have a direct view of the environments that they're operating in, and ensure those policies are being adhered to. In the interim, we're starting to work with third-party platforms that suck in questionnaires and all the policies that they'll give you, and we'll look for disparities between them, and we'll compare the results in the policies to the results in the questionnaire they've given you, and give you a view on that. And I suppose without being able to see inside the environment, that's probably as good as it's going to get.
We had a whole load of questions that come in online. May I pick one out? Is there a real risk of over-relying on AI for threat detection without truly understanding how it works or what it might miss?
Yes.
Yes.
So the problem we've had with AI, well, there's two problems really, because you've got AI-powered defenses, and you've got agentic AI that we use to help us be more efficient as a function, and both of them carry a similar risk. So largely, I mean, if you look at the AI Act, AI should be quite transparent, but in many cases the black boxes. We don't know why they've made the decision, and therefore we can't validate something it might have missed.
Yes.
That is a genuine problem, and I think that the only answer to that realistically is to layer AI as one of your many layered defenses, by which you can still rely on more traditional controls, but you have the benefit of AI, and particularly on the agentic side, it does unlock a lot of efficiencies. So in security operations and incident response, we use automation tooling. We use Talk, which is a security orchestration tool, and we use some AI capabilities around that as well from Microsoft, and we use them together to do some of the base level lifting, some of the most basic responses, and that allows us maybe somewhere between 15 and 20% efficiencies across the team, and allows them to focus on stuff that's more complicated and more challenging. You could argue that stuff that might get missed there, but they're lower priority, and they're also areas that are covered by additional controls. So,
what do you need from government and regulators?
The one thing I suppose globally I think everyone could do with is more support for those kind of open source initiatives like MITRE. So everyone that I know that runs sort of good quality security teams, they rely very heavily on frameworks like MITRE. So we use MITRE Attack and MITRE Defend across 3 of my pillars regularly, and it's an incredible framework. And then this year everyone panicked because it looked like the funding was going to be pulled, and then it would stop progressing. It would just die where it was, which would have implications for AI, because that's kind of where they're building the model now. So we really need clarity, I think, and some proper backing for those kind of frameworks like MITRE, like CVSS, those ones that were under risk and are now looks like they're going to be supported. But if they went away, everyone is worse off.
And finally, it's always good to ask a completely unfair and impossible question to finish off a discussion. We've looked at sort of short-term and medium-term considerations. How far can you look ahead? What sort of cyber security threats and challenges do we have on the distant timescale?
It's hard to answer, because I think there's a little bit is around of what you do kind of as CISO is how much strategic thinking you can open up outside of the firefighting. And I think that's probably a good measure of how effective the team is, that percentage split, and it's never going to be particularly in favor of strategic thinking, I don't think. No. We typically look at 3-year strategies and 3 to 5 year threat landscapes. A really good resource for this, I don't work for the ISF, by the way, but the Information Security Forum do a threat horizon report, which is every 3 years in advance, what they expect to see. It's usually pretty good in terms of what they're putting forward, and then in the next 3 years, and we've been using them for probably 5-6 years. So we use stuff like that. We have other threat intelligence feeds. We get other risk reporting in from some of the big 4. Gartner have some good resources, but I think you have to rely heavily on those kind of big players.
Surely.
And ISF's not expensive, but it's still 17 grand a year, and we would pay that just I think for the threat report, and they have other stuff, but that we kind of put all of that together alongside our own threat modeling and from my risk function, the risk work they do, and then all of that gets fed into the strategy to work out where we're going to be focusing for the next 3 years. So we run a kind of rolling 3-year strategy.
Thank you. And so to wrap up, if one dare do so, what are your takeaways? What's your advice for your colleagues across all industries? What would you have them take away from your experience?
I think the one thing I would say is, and Tesco have been very good at this, and I actually think they've been leading, this is not me specifically, this is more retail.
Sure.
They prepared a response protocol around these incidents where they can basically cut off access to everything apart from customer access if they have to, which allow them to still serve their customers but massively reduce their risk. And I think that if some of the other retailers had done that, and obviously hindsight's a good idea, and no one had that before, I think that you're in a really good position to be able to say, you know, somebody phones up and says, we've seen all of this traffic on our monitoring solution. The first thing you do is say, okay, instigate the protocol. That gives us a few days to work out what's going on. And I think that's a really smart thing to do.
Thank you very much indeed. Martyn Booth from dunnhumby. It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you.